Another thing you talk about in the book is the folk theory of democracy. Can you explain what that is and what's wrong with it, at least according to its critics?
Yeah, I mean, so the folk theory of democracy, this is a phrase that is used in this book called Democracy for Realists by Christopher Aiken and Larry Bartels that came out in 2016 to, I think, more praise than I think I've ever seen for a political science book in the popular press. People reviewed this thing all over the place, every publication, right-wing publications, liberal publications. And the basic theory of it is that this idea that in a democracy where we have a system where people come together and they think about their policies and think about their interests and vote on that basis for what they think will be good in a kind of rational way. It's not what happens at all. Democracy is riven with all kinds of problems, from tribalism to people voting for arbitrary reasons. And we should come away from all of that understanding with a more cynical view of whether democracy works in the way that we believe and more kind of humble aspirations for it. I get into the arguments pretty deeply in the second chapter of the book. A lot of it's kind of like technical and not going to bore people. One thing I will say is that one of the examples that they lean on in this book is there were these shark attacks in the early 20th century off the coast of New England.
Amity.
Right. Well, right, but they did an analysis of like results in that presidential election and concluded that the shark attacks had actually motivated people's voting to a certain extent, which proves that people are stupid and shouldn't be trusted with the vote, like implicitly. There was a researcher at the University of Chicago who like looked at their analysis and saw that they literally made certain basic mistakes. It didn't seem like shark attacks ended up mattering in that election at all. But that example is indicative of the whole thrust of the thing, which is that people are dumb. Democracy can't do all we expect it to, and so on. And I would absolutely concede that people are often misinformed and may make mistakes, and both ethical and informational when they go to the polls. I think Donald Trump is the president today, partially for that reason. But we also do very, very little relative to other countries to improve that situation. We have very few investments in the public media in this country. The few that we have are being attacked and destroyed right now.
I mean, NPR was basically just NPR's done pretty much. Like,
yeah, it seems like
no more Antiques Roadshow, like none of that.
We'll see. And NPR, PBS, these were not by no means perfect institutions. But the point is, like in other parts of the world, in Europe, there's an understanding that we need a public, non-commercially funded media infrastructure to augment or supplement what we have in the public that's profit-driven, because you get better news that way. It improves the informational environment. We could be doing that. We're not. We could be investing more in informing the public in all kinds of ways, from their time in school up to their time as adults. So we have no reason to believe that there's no capacity to get people to the polls with better information, better ideas. But also, one of the things I wanted to challenge too is this fetishization of expertise and people needing a certain knowledge base in order to participate meaningfully in politics. When to my mind, one, experts are wrong about a lot of things. Experts disagree about a lot. A lot of destructive policies were enacted over the last 20, 30 years in this country by experts, from a foreign policy that killed hundreds of thousands of people. It is killing thousands of people as we speak, to, economic policies that led to the ruination of a lot of ordinary working people in this country. Experts can be wrong. We should take that seriously. So that's one critique. But also, we all have values. Whether or not you know exactly how much we spend in a given year on Medicare, you do have certain basic intuitions about what people are or aren't entitled to when it comes to healthcare, what it should or shouldn't be a public responsibility. And I think it's fine for you to come into politics with that content, that material, and actually vital that you do so.
You say that, and then like I was just thinking about this the other night in terms of like the way I see a lot of Democratic politicians arguing against democratic socialist principles, or a candidate like Mamdani. They're just sort of like, oh, his ideas sound great, but like, how are we going to get it done? Like, is this realistic given the current rotten political system that we all live under? And I just think like, I find that to be sort of a dodge to like sort of artificially constrain the limits of people's values and imagination within this exact present moment. So like whether something can get done given the current makeup of Congress is to me less important than the values that like the policy represents in the person promoting it, and that by its promotion in a democracy, theoretically, is the process by which it becomes possible. Do you think that that's like? Do you find that something similar, or do you think that's a reasonable way of thinking about values versus expertise?
I think so. I think so. And that's one of the things that I think motivates the approach the book takes in general, because I am trying to get people to think again about like first principles. What are the actual ethical principles, first, initial background values that we're bringing to our politics in the first place? Once you do that, you end up taking the institutions we have for granted less, and your capacity to imagine changing them as a practical matter expands. But yeah, I mean, there's something perverse too, I think, about, again, the way we talk about the founders and the founding generation of this country and the Constitution. I I'm not a fan of the founding generation of this country, as might be obvious. But I think the one thing you can take from that moment is, well, these are people who saw themselves as having the right to sort of refound society, remake society on the basis of principle. They broke from an empire. They write a constitution. They scrapped that constitution, write the one we have, all because they had certain ideas and principles. And, 2 centuries later, it seems like the lesson that political establishment or people who are centrists or, more conventional liberals want us to take from that moment in the founding is a respect for institutions, which is weird. Like we have the country we have now because they were not respecting institutions. Like in fact, they violently broke from them. And so I think that part of the motivation of the book is to give people the sense that they have a right, on the basis of their own values, principles, their vision for a better world, to consider themselves at the table and consider themselves people who are also founders, who also have the ability to determine the direction of this country, and to expand its political possibilities. So yeah, that's part of the overarching reason why, or one of the overarching reasons why the book exists in the first place.
I remember reading something from Peter Onoff, who's I think like one of the leading Jefferson scholars in this country, and he made the point that what we think of as the American Revolution was not really a revolution in the like historical sense that most revolutions, like the French Revolution, for instance.
Yeah.
And he described it more as an insurrection that changed management of the British Empire in the New World. And then, like, to expand on that, I think, like, Eric Foner and others, or Matt Karp, who we've had on the show, has argued that it was the Civil War, in fact, in this country, that was the first real American Revolution, and that, like, that ongoing process, that revolution is still unfinished. Could you expand a little bit more on those ideas?
Yeah, so, I mean, the Foner idea that the Civil War ends with these amendments to the Constitution, 13th, 14th, 15th, that are so fundamental that we end up in a different society afterwards. He writes us in the second founding, and that's one of the reasons why the book is subtitled The Case for a New American Founding. Just this idea that it is within our capacity and certainly our prerogative to fundamentally reconstitute this country in accordance with the beliefs that we now hold and our aspirations. Yeah, I mean, it's the idea that everything of value in this country was accomplished in 1787, and our job as citizens is sort of go over it with a feather duster every now and then. It's just stupid. It's not true to like the American historical experience, but also it's not.
It's like the Constitution's like, don't touch grandma's Hummel figurines. You may break
exactly,
it. Yeah,
exactly. And especially at this point now where it should be obvious to people, and I think it is obvious to a lot, increasing numbers of Americans, that we are in the mess we're in because these institutions are set up the way that they are. They make it difficult for us to solve basic problems, to give people their due in the economy. They're part of the reason why Donald Trump became a viable political figure in the first place. And, to have this kind of reverential, sacralizing attitude in the midst of all that, even as everything falls apart and we're lurching towards oblivion, I think is insane.